Hello, Bible readers. The woman, the Messiah, Christians, the earth itself, God, all God's angels, especially Michael, versus the evil trinity, the dragon, which tries to be like God the Father, the sea beast, who tries to rule like Lamekins but can't, and the land beast, who, kind of like a snake oil salesman, tries to fit people into a world that serves no one in the end. Now that we know a little more about where John pulls these images and characters from, it's going to be a lot easier to make sense of the story itself. So today's post gets us through chapters 12 and 13. So the dragon tries to snatch the child, much like Herod tries to have Jesus killed, but the child is taken to God and God's throne. Well, that's the story of Jesus in a nutshell, a very small nutshell. Of course, Jesus does not just get taken to God's presence, to God's throne, by escaping death somehow. He doesn't go directly to go. It's by dying that Jesus defeats the dragon. And then in verses 7 to 12, we hear about the dragon being thrown down out of heaven. Boring says, this is not the explanation for the origin of Satan, as the Bible does not deal in such explanations. Instead, this idea that Satan is cast out, yes, it happened, but kind of like Jesus' birth is an ongoing truth, and we sing about it best when we sing, "Joy to the world, the Lord is come." Boring makes the point that the fall of Satan from heaven is not just then, but also now, that it is continuous. Chapter 12, verse 10 says, "Now have come the salvation and power." There's an ongoingness to this idea that Satan is thrown down. And what that's getting at is that Christians of every generation continue to participate in this project, the throwing. We are not passive spectators 2,000 years later of something God did, but are involved ourselves in the defeat of Satan. Our testimony, remaining faithful unto death, the ministry of martyrdom, whether a Christian participates in that ministry in 96 AD with John or among his churches, or when someone participates in those ministries as it happens in 2023, those marked with the blood of the Lamekins have something to do with the dragon being cast out from heaven. So that's cool. Now, I've made the claim in previous posts that John uses myths of his day to help communicate a new and unique message. Well, here's what I mean. He uses all these Greek and ancient Near East images of dragons and woman and champion of light versus powers of darkness. He uses them all in such a familiar way that we might be tempted to think John is just taking a bunch of old ingredients and making something very similar to all that other old stuff. But notice the innovation. The pagan world, all these other myths, the given was that the history of the world, your story itself, is the result of a bunch of stuff that happened in heaven. You know, the gods did this and that, they had this battle, and then this happened, and because of that, the moon orbits the earth. Because of what happened in the heavens, good gets rewarded and bad gets punished, or whatever. But John tells a story in Revelation where the scene of God's saving activity is not some distant, unknowable place. It's here on earth, in the life of Jesus, in the life of the church, those marked with the blood of the Lamb. The incarnation, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the testimony of Christians happens on earth. And that results in the defeat of the evil powers in heaven. I mean, that's a pretty important innovation, that we are not at the mercy of some faraway gods, but that we instead participate in God's story, and that affects the heavenly places. So the devil and all the devil's forces have lost. They've been cast down to this world, angry and frustrated. Boring says They then act like a poor loser football team. Helplessly behind with 3 minutes left, having already lost, they decide, let's do as much damage as possible while we can. This is how John sees the situation of his suffering fellow Christians. The powers of evil are just offering a last gasp. And to line up with them, with Rome, with that cult of Caesar, like, just hang in there till the end, is what John is saying. The only way to lose people in the churches in Asia is to switch sides or quit. Hang in there. And that, of course, doesn't just apply to them then, but to us now as well. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the beast from the earth. Remember, it reflects the power of the Holy Spirit, and so its purpose is to get people to worship the emperor, to convince people of its authority. This beast works miracles and promotes worship, even looks like the Lamb. But the truth of faith is not proven or disproven by displays of miracles or by the lack of miracles. Old Testament prophets show us this. The truth of faith is proven by whether a prophet's message directs people into the power of lambikins, a slaughtered lamb, or doesn't. Boring says, the most notorious act of the false prophet beast is to mark everyone, rich and poor, slave and free, with a mark on the hand or forehead, without which no one can participate in the economic life of the community. He says, since this text has through the centuries been a happy hunting ground for religious quacks, it is important to say a few words. And then he has more than a few words on this, actually. So I'm going to try to boil it down for you. It is, number one, it is an important passage, as it claims that everybody is marked somehow. Either you bear the mark of the Lamb, or you bear the mark of the beast. The point John is making here is that everybody's marked by one or the other. There are no anonymous Christians. There are no middle-of-the-road Christians. John made it clear in his 7 messages to the churches at the beginning of Revelation already. This is a reiteration. You're either following Jesus or you're not. Number 2, the ark of the beast, the mark of the beast, is to be taken seriously, but not literally. Let me say more about that. Christians of John's time would have experienced economic pressure for being Christian. Guild membership, for example, in whatever trade, may have required worship at a pagan ceremony. Business contracts often went to those who patriotically supported their Roman government. I think we can imagine the kinds of temptations that Christians lived with as they sought to worship God and make a living. That's why John makes this connection with, marked with the sign of the beast. It's for economic status, you could say. Number 3, the mark of the beast is a number, a man's name, which can be explained by, and here's something I would never have put together myself, explained by the ancient practice of gematria, common in John's time. And all gematria is like Roman numerals, you probably know, are letters, right? They don't have different symbols in Latin for letters versus numbers. They use letters to be numbers. So like Super Bowl LVII is 57. Gematria. In Greek, Hebrew, Latin, every letter is also a number. So it's simple to convert a word to a number. It is not so easy to convert a number to a word, because it could be a variety of letter combinations, right? Get that? So the number 666 does not identify a name per se. But what it does is it says something about the name's significance. John wasn't trying to challenge everybody to figure out who is the beast. They knew who the beast was. He wanted them to recognize what the beast was. A fraud, offering a mark that wasn't the blood of the Lamb. Number 4, to assign 666 as the number would have spoken loudly, almost. That's what 666 would have sounded like. Almost but not the end. As much as 7 is the number of completeness, wholeness. 6 is the number of almost. Incompleteness. Judgment, as we have seen in the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets. And the 6th is never the last word. Finally, number 5, he says it is the number of a person. Well, add the Roman letters as numerals that spell Neron Caesar. Guess what number you come up with? 666. Nero was the first Roman emperor to turn his petty power to kill onto Christians. John sees any successors as those who live out a return of Nero, if you will. So some Christians were thinking, like, what's the big deal to flirt with the empire a little bit, especially if it keeps me safe or especially if it makes me some money? John was saying, beware, it's Nero all over again. Kind of like whenever anti-Semitism boils up again and again, we might say, beware, it's Hitler all over again. That's the point John is trying to make. This whole section about evil is not asking people to decode a puzzle. It's saying, be alert, understand Rome for what it is. Be careful about what and who you believe and trust and who you follow and who it leads you to worship. All right, tomorrow, or next post, I should say, whenever you see the next post, I'll be finishing up chapter 14. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.